When you do an intentional pass interference, the best outcome is they didn't realize it was pass interference, and that sparked controversy. That sparked a sense of urgency that the NFL had to do something about it. The competition committee, which is always afraid of everything, afraid of its own shadow, afraid of unintended consequences, afraid of this, afraid of that, they ultimately got pushed into a corner to adopt replay review for pass interference, which is a great idea in theory. It was horribly executed, and I think, if anything, that makes the competition committee even more concerned now about what to do for this situation. And I say all that, Myles, because the Ravens have proposed, and this was weeks ago, the addition of a booth umpire, an eighth member of the officiating crew who would be in the replay booth, who would have access to everything we see, and would operate as a member of the crew who could talk to the referee, just like when we see two or three of them getting together on the field and talking. They're trying to figure out what did they see. This is the best way to avoid a disaster. This makes sense. And as the Ravens argued in the paperwork that they submitted, it's happening at some point. We may as well do it now. So with the competition committee, and I think people tend to overstate what power and influence the competition committee has because the owners routinely ignore them. The competition committee has proposed this modified replay official enhancement where there are certain objective things that the replay official can help with. It's not going to fix the Tommy Lee Lewis, Nickel Roby-Coleman situation. It's not. There's still no fix for that. And that's the problem because, Myles, my concern is this. There's eventually going to be a next officiating debacle. With booth umpire or sky judge or whatever we want to call it, you got a chance to avoid it. With enhanced replay official duties, you don't. That's why they need to ignore what the competition committee has suggested and embrace the Ravens' proposal.
I loved what you wrote about this, Mike, because you basically said it's a half measure, what the competition committee is proposing. It just reminds me of Breaking Bad, no half measures. You should always go for the full measure when you have the opportunity to get the full measure. And I think that they should have gone with the full measure after that play with Nickel Roby-Coleman and Tommy Lee Lewis, which I got to say, frankly, as a selfish person, was one of the most consequentially good plays in NFL history for me because I was covering the Rams that year for the Rams. I got to go to the Super Bowl, and partly because of that play. So I love that play. I think that play is great. I am so glad they didn't call pass interference. I had a fantastic week at the Super Bowl, even though that game was not one to write home about. So I think, having said all of that, they clearly need to do something to make sure that something like that can't happen. And when you are just making this half measure of, yes, we'll enhance, the replay official, give him more duties than he already has, and that person, that official, already has a lot of things to do. So basically, you're trying to say, yes, we think we can keep the status quo as it is, but just tweak it a little bit when really there's a clear and obvious solution that they're just, for whatever reason, don't want to do yet. And they're going to have to do it eventually. So why not just do it now? Rip the Band-Aid off, get it right.
You do realize that if you continue to remain gainfully employed with us, there's a pretty good chance you'll go to the Super Bowl regardless of which teams are in it. And your chances of going are enhanced if you quit mentioning a certain book. I'm going to start keeping a list like Ryan on The Office. If you keep mentioning that book, you will be asked to stay home and mind the store while the rest of us go to the Super Bowl. So it's up to you as to whether or not you keep mentioning a certain book. That's your litmus test to get to the Super Bowl. So, and that applies to Shireen and everybody else.
Then that I was a PFT writer of the future, all right? So, what was I supposed to do?
That's good. That's good. Well done. Well played. Look, here's the reality for the NFL. Legalized gambling, or gambleizing as Sims calls it from time to time, to the point where I almost say it from time to time, is spreading. More than 20 states now have it. Eventually there will be 30, 35, 40. I think the maximum is 44 because, frankly, there's only 44 states that currently have the basic lottery things that we've had for decades in other states. And I remember what a controversy that was in the 70s with the daily number and the scratch-off lottery tickets. And, oh, my God, here we go. It's a slippery slope. Well, when gambling is in 30, 35, 40 states, when these calls happen, it's going to have a much different reaction than just team in New Orleans lost and was robbed of its shot to go to the Super Bowl. So senators and congressmen from Louisiana huff and puff. There's the three pigs again. This is going to be people who have lost money wagering on the team that ultimately ended up on the wrong side of that bet because of the bad call. Even if the same team wins, you know, one of the worst calls of the past 15 years was when Scott Green, who's now the head of the NFL Referees Association, just flat out blew a call after the Steelers had taken a lead against the Chargers late in a 2008 game in November. I think it was a late afternoon game. Blew the call. Should have been a touchdown for the Steelers after the Steelers took the lead late. Steelers would have covered. They didn't cover. Millions of dollars wagered illegally, for the most part, changed hands. You make that tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that change hands legally, and something like that happens. What the NFL needs to ultimately fear, Myles, and I know I've mentioned this before because you made fun of me for it, they need to fear the creation of an agency by the federal government charged with the oversight of professional sports for the purposes of ensuring the integrity of wagering. No different than the SEC, not the football conference, the federal agency that showed up 5 years after the stock market crash in 1929. Before that, no SEC. So an extreme example like that is the kind of thing that gets the NFL into a huge problem. So they need to do what they can now to get their affairs in order, or someone else is going to do it for them, and they're not going to like the rules and regulations that apply.
Yes, I made fun of you because you went all the way back to the SEC instead of just saying the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is something that, you know, more people remember because it happened way more recently. So you just gave me the opportunity to do that again. I think that you're absolutely right that they have to take care of this themselves. And that's why we're really both saying you can't do the half measure. Just do the full measure. You know, it's just one of these things that I think is probably a societal problem at large. Sometimes we just don't want to make any change because we're so satisfied with the status quo. And maybe even satisfied is the wrong word, but we're just content or complacent, really, to stick with everything that we know. Let's say High School Musical song, stick with the status quo. You probably don't know what that is,
oh
Mike.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, wow.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
High School Musical?
It came to my mind. I'm sorry. I don't even know why, but I shouldn't have done that. But my point is, I think when you have a society that just loves tradition and loves to keep things the way that they are, it's hard to sometimes just say, no, we really need to change this because change is coming whether we like it or not. So we really should be proactive about it instead of reactive. But at this point, the NFL is already reactive because of that video that we just started the segment with, because something like that should never happen in a conference championship game. And it really has a lot to do with determining the outcome. Now, you can say, if you're Rams fans, and some of them may get in my mentions later, that didn't really determine the outcome, because I've made that argument before myself. I know it. But look, when you have that situation, you really should do everything you possibly can to prevent it from ever happening again.
I think the fact that their solution from 2 years ago failed so badly makes them hesitant to go out on a limb again. And also, there is a financial component. It's one thing to add more duties to a current employee, which is what the competition committee proposal will do. It's another thing to have to go out and hire a whole new crew of extra officials to serve as the booth umpire or the sky judge. And even as the NFL is swimming in coins like Scrooge McDuck, they don't want to give any of those coins away if they can avoid it.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.